You're good.
All right, so we're calling the strategic planning meeting to order. What's today? October 27th, I believe. And we're at what, 7? Man, I can actually see my phone. 7:43 p.m. So we'll get started. And first, let's discuss if anybody has any questions or concerns in regards to August 9th, 2022 meeting minutes.
I reviewed them today. Didn't have any questions.
I do not either. I don't know if anybody else on here does.
All right. I think you're good. And turn off that. Okay, so we have a couple things in terms of agenda items tonight. With the amount of people, it may be hard to do what I was going to do for the policy reading. But again, like all of our meetings, we like to start with the mission and vision statements, or mission statements to inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. We continue to highlight this at the beginning of our meetings, especially our strategic planning committee meetings, because this is sort of the driving mission and vision factors of why we do what we do, why some of the projects that we're undertaking are the projects that we're undertaking, as well as what was the driver for the strategic plan and comp plan that we had recently done. And we also always share the pillars and of our strategic plan, and what we've been doing is, again, trying to tie back a lot of what we talk about and the projects that we have or initiatives that we have back to these 4 areas, so that we can stay focused and stay on point. And those are rigorous teaching and learning, supporting all learners, building community, and modernizing our facilities and systems. So tonight, because this is a reschedule from the earlier October meeting, I wanted to just quickly go over a couple of the policies that were presented at the October board meeting that would then now be considered coming up for second reading and approval. Like we had done before, on our standing agenda will be a review of policies for first reading before they go to the board for first reading, so that we can have some parent and staff feedback and questions and get some additional eyes on those before they go to the board for first reading, which would then sit for 30 days, and then the board votes on them as a second reading at the following board meeting. So now we're kind of in between. These have already been presented for first reading, so we're just going to quickly go over them on second reading. I wanted to go over an update to some of the changes to our application and registration process for next year for families. It's the end of October, but our application actually opens up in like 10 weeks. So for the next school year, so it's not too far away, and we've been making a couple changes and tweaks to the process so that we can better market, enroll, and bring students on board. I also wanted to share and get some feedback on a proposed modification to our flexible instructional day process. Inclement weather is coming soon, and that is one of the tools that we have to address some inclement weather. So I wanted to speak about that, as well as address a process that we're going to try to start to utilize on the 1st of November regarding regarding student transportation. So the first and second readings that we have, it'll be the second reading that we have for policies are on the slide here. I also just sent out via the calendar invite update the links that are on this slide, as well as the slide deck. What we are going to do sort of each week to try to break these up and to get both a summary for everybody, so that you may not necessarily have to go in depth into reading these before the meeting, unless you really want to, is to do a quick breakout room activity each month, where we'll break out into breakout rooms, a couple people per room, We'll have about 7 to 10 minutes to go through and read the policy. Might be a little bit longer if it's a month where there's some really long ones, and then to come back and share with everybody else sort of what was a summary of the policy, what were some questions that you might have had as readers from your perspective as either a parent or a board member or a teacher or a support staff, and that I can take notes on those to address before the first reading policies go before the board, basically the following week. These are the policies that were presented to the board for first reading last week, and just wanted to kind of go over a couple provisions of these, and then see if anybody had any general questions. We're not going to do the breakout room activity tonight. I don't think there's enough people, and I don't want to keep everybody super late. So the first one is a policy on hazing. The policy on hazing. This is probably one that most people, particularly parents, are interested in as it relates to sort of that student discipline, bullying, cyberbullying, sort of realm of policies. The hazing policy is very straightforward, and it keeps in line and starts to bring together the bullying and cyberbullying policy. It's in line with the threat assessments policy, as well as other student discipline policies that are in there. It's basically a zero tolerance policy that, we would not accept any form of hazing within school clubs, the school athletics, anything like that, and puts on requirements of notification and reporting for both students and staff, as well as safeguards in place for students who report any instances of hazing within organizations at the school. Our food services policy. This is an update to our existing food services policy. It outlines our requirements under the free and reduced lunch requirements, reporting requirements to the board, how we are going to do our food service audits, and reporting requirements to stay in line with certain health guidelines. It aligns with our wellness policy, and explains the process that we would go through in identifying and addressing negative lunch balances, who we can and can't talk to when addressing students about lunch balances and within the food services department, and how we would go about making sure that parents are aware of the ability to apply for free and reduced lunch, and it establishes the process for that. A secondary policy related to food services is our food handling at special events. This is an update to our existing policy. It's mainly just a formatting update and then indexing it with our food services policy within board docs. This is the policy. This is an important one for staff to read. This really has to do with what you can and can't provide in terms of food at fundraisers, at games, at special events. And if you are seeking to offer some type of food service at these events, the requirement of having a certified food handler present, as well as specific guidelines from the health department in terms of how hot you have to keep certain food items for a period of time, or how cold. So that's one that's important for staff to make sure that they are aware of once it's in place right now. But once this gets reapproved and I send out the staff board briefing, this will be one that I point out to make sure that staff reorient themselves with. 615 is acceptable use. This is just an update to our existing policy. It really has to do with just students and staff making sure that they are utilizing school provided technology in an appropriate way. It explains the network safeguards that we have in place, the monitoring that we have in place, as well as pointing back to human resources policies and student discipline policies if those provisions are not followed. This also was an update policy where we are retiring a number of policies, of older policies, that now the provisions of those older policies are all held within the acceptable use policy. So there are a number that are going to be rescinded related to the IT department, staff utilizing their own computer, students utilizing their own computer. Those were all separate policies before, and they've all been combined into one just for efficiency's sake. Policy 624 is an important policy for staff. It is the maintaining professional, adult, and student boundaries policy. It is the same guidelines and same provisions as the staff's current student fraternization policy that's in their human resources handbook, but this would be a board adopted policy. It outlines the educator ethics, the expectations of staff and their relationships with students, and outlines what types of potential consequences the school would take if those ethical boundaries were breached by professional staff. And the last policy that is up is a breach of information policy. This is an IT policy that outlines the requirements of the school in terms of notifying parents, staff members, students, if there was a cybersecurity attack or a data breach within the school, its systems, or third-party providers that the school contracts with, in which protected information or directory information might have been obtained. So I always think of the example of there was a local school recently in the last couple of years that was hacked, and students' names and addresses and everything were taken, and the school, this basically establishes the requirement of the school to notify those individuals if that were to happen. So it's a very straightforward policy, and it piggybacks off of our cybersecurity protocols that we have in place for our that are required by our insurance. So that's sort of the 6 policies in a nutshell. I did share those within the calendar invite. So if you want to go back and kind of review some of those, you're more than welcome to email feedback within that calendar thread or directly to me, and we can make sure that either questions get addressed or things get fixed or added if they need to be. Are there any quick questions on the 6 of those?
Brian, for the maintaining professional, adult, and student boundaries, is there any language in there in regards to what that looks like for coaches as well? I think teachers have, a little more background and understand what professional communication and boundaries look like, but a teacher or a coach who has never taught, or maybe he doesn't have much coaching experience in being around kids, that could look a lot different, especially in terms of communication.
Yeah, so it falls within all professional staff employed by the school. The coaches do get some training from GA regarding like what their what those ethics guidelines are. And then in our social media policy that was just passed at the last board meeting, it actually specifically outlines for athletic coaches what the appropriate channels of communication are, that they're not supposed to be communicating with a single student. It should be group messaging to the entire team, unless it's related to students' medical information, and then the AD is supposed to be on that thread with the outside coaches. So it was very clear about communication guidelines for the athletic department.
That's cool. Yeah, it just looks different, right? Like a teacher communicates either in person with the student or via email, right? It's all documented. It just might look a little different with coaches and players.
Yep.
So that's cool.
All right. So the next agenda item was the FID day student attendance. So we had utilized a couple FID days. So our FID application was submitted a couple years ago. It was good for 3 years, and this is our last year within that 3-year period. So we will have to renew and resubmit in the spring for a new 3-year approval period. Every time we did utilize a FID day, I had followed up with a survey to parents about what went well, what didn't go well, as well as monitored some aspects of the implementation of it. And one of the pain points that continued to come up, both from a school operation standpoint and from the parents, was related to how like attendance was being taken. So currently, and what we had done in the past, was student attendance was tied to student accounts logging into Schoology on a FID day, because that was how we were pushing out a lot of our assignments and information on those sort of asynchronous, flexible instructional days. Now, when we were in COVID, that system was being utilized a lot by all of our K through 12 teachers. So our primary students at K to 3 were utilizing it a little bit more. Our teachers at ELC were utilizing it a little bit more. But now that we're sort of back within the normal operations of school, it's not leveraged as much and utilized as much in K to 3. So there's really 2 concerns that have been kind of brought up about student attendance being tied to a system login. The first is, like I just said, our K to 3 students aren't being exposed to the platform as much anymore. So if, tomorrow we had snow and we had a student attendance tied to Schoology login, a lot of our K to 3 kids would not know what that is. The K to 3 parents may not know what that is, just because it's not a tool that's regularly used down in those grade levels as much anymore. The other issue is, a lot of times, especially in the past for these FID days, from the attendance department's perspective, oftentimes parents logged into Schoology, not the student, to get student assignments or student work or information about the FID day that was posted into Schoology. And because the parent logged in and not the student, that family would get a absence notice, because we were really looking for student specific credentials and identifying numbers when we were looking at the log reports to map attendance. So it created a lot of confusion and a lot of discrepancies, a lot of work for the attendance office, as well as a lot of stress, I think, on the parents, like thinking I did everything right, we logged in, and there was sort of this caveat. It was, well, your student didn't log in. And then we had to go back and check, try to double check a lot of reports for lawful school attendance. So what we were proposing to do is it was a modification to the way that attendance is being taken. And this is actually a way that a lot of school districts actually take attendance, was just posting a short form survey in Parent Portal. So when a FID day is utilized, parents would log into their Parent Portal account, which we are continuing to put more and more into Parent Portal, so that we're encouraging families to continue to utilize and access that for information. They would access an attendance form and then basically indicate that their child's participating on the FID day. And that would be all that the parents needed to do for lawful school attendance on a FID day. The only concern when speaking with some people about the change was that was sort of going to the other side of the spectrum, our secondary students. Like, a lot of times the kids just logged into Schoology because they were used to it, our high school students, our middle school students, and there wasn't really an action item on behalf of the parents to have to do anything. And this is sort of putting that, an extra step and a little bit more on secondary parents who may not necessarily have been previously as involved on a FID day as maybe our K to 6 families. I think it just has to deal with messaging and continuing to remind parents, even throughout the day on a FID day, of don't forget to do your attendance survey. And it's something that I think we can overcome, but I think it will it will solve a number of problems regarding the login issues and attendance discrepancies. Any thoughts or other ideas? I know there's a couple people here who are also parents that might have gone through a FID day with a student.
Hi, it's Tracy. I just wanted to say that I think a lot of the parent login issues, like they might log in from work and may not have Wi-Fi at home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they might do it that way. And I do agree with you, Brian, that going through the parent portal, while it might be a little weird for the high school parents, I think it's that like the ELC parents especially would be able to see it and be able to do it, especially with them not being as familiar with Schoology.
And from an attendance standpoint, like you wouldn't need Wi-Fi to access, say, the parent portal on your cell phone. And if this is it, and the parent forms can all be filled out via the mobile app or their phone too. So if it's like I live in an area where there's no, our Wi-Fi is down, as long as they would still have cellular service, they could still at least do the attendance portion of the FID day while they wait for maybe their Comcast or their Verizon to come back up if it were that type of a storm.
Brian, another thing to think about, I like the short form survey, right? Could you do it two ways? Use the same survey, but maybe high school students are responsible for filling theirs out via whatever Schoology, Power School, whatever you decide to put it on, right? And then K-8 parents are the parents that need to go on and fill it out for the kids. So K-8, the parents have the responsibility. High school, the student has the responsibility. You could even say K-6, parents have the responsibility. 7 through 12, it's on the student.
Yep, I believe I can actually turn the survey on so that it will be visible both from a parent account and a student account.
So either or, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You might think about that. That's all.
Yeah, Brian, I think that would be helpful as well. As a parent, I would hate to think that my kids could be marked, could do all of their work, do everything that they need to do, and yet still be somehow marked absent for something that I may have forgotten to do, that
Right.
they would have otherwise taken that on just fine.
Yep, and I can do that. And that the issue that we were having was almost the opposite of that with K-3. Like the parents were doing everything. They logged in to Schoology, but they logged into their parent account and not the
Right.
kids. And then they got a message and they were like, but I did everything. So we were trying to think of a way to still have some type of action item, because they have from a FID application standpoint, there has to be some level of either of the families doing something, because we have to specifically answer like, how are you taking attendance from a federal accountability standpoint? And most schools do one of these two things. It's either a system login or it's a SIS survey or a Google survey or something that they go on and do, and that's both students and parents. So I can make sure that it's available both to students and parents to be able to do to do that. Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Anything we can do to improve access and increase the actual fill-in rate would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is we have obviously been having some ongoing concerns with our bus driver shortage. It has been experienced to the greatest effect in Coatesville. We are often sometimes uninformed about what is going on with buses, if they are coming, if they are not coming, if they are late. If we have a substitute driver, some of it is we're never really informed, or sometimes we're informed late. Sometimes we get plenty of notice. So it's kind of, based on the volume of issues that I think are occurring at one particular time on a particular day. And then oftentimes when we are getting information about buses, whether they're not going to have a driver, or whether we're having to try to consolidate buses, we are oftentimes having to craft many messages which delays notification to parents, because there are sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 different scenarios going on in one afternoon when we are without a bus, without a driver, and then potentially trying to get parents to call and pick up students via car line, or we're boarding them on different buses to try to just get students home, as opposed to being stranded at school. So we were trying to ask the question of, how do we better communicate with parents changes in transportation as they're happening, and if and when we're informed of those things. So we thought of trying to put together sort of a bus status page on our website that would dynamically publish updates, and it would basically look something like this. This is one for State Road. This has every district and every bus that currently comes in the AM and the PM at State Road. And what we would be doing is really updating this with information. So like, is it delayed? Is there no driver? Are we combining buses? We can continue to add specific information and scenarios to this sheet, and then provide details within this, and then have a single stock parent notification message within BBComs that basically says, there's been an update or a change to your child's transportation. Please see this, and point them directly to this. So we're not having to type multiple different emails and multiple different scenarios and grab and curate contact lists when we're trying to get information out to parents as soon as possible. And then really see if we can try to train parents of, hey, in the morning and in the afternoon, it might be a good practice just to check this to see whether or not anything has been entered, as we're trying to work through morning bus runs and afternoon bus runs. This would be able to be put into the school's mobile app. So they would be, if you have the school's mobile app, it'd be something you could easily click and pull up on demand, as well as on a button on the main page of the website. But in that stock message that you would get, it would basically just say, there's been a change, click here, and it would bring you to this, so that we can quickly enter multiple bus details and information on this as quickly as possible. So we wanted to get some feedback on that idea and that thought for trying to better communicate any of these bus changes and issues that we're running into.
I just want to say, I think that's a great idea. I'm glad that it's available on the mobile app, because as a parent myself, my kids' school use Where's the Bus app.
Yep.
And I find that helpful. So as long as you can go on your phone and it's available right on the website, and you can just go in and check, I think it's very helpful as a parent.
Yeah. So, and I've reached out to the bus contractors about those. The hard thing is that none of our bus contractors have GPS enabled buses where they would have that software on board to be able to utilize applications like Where's the Bus or geolocation. That would be ideal, but because we don't contract direct or own our own buses, it's not something that we can push. This was kind of like, we were trying to find somewhere in the middle to increase our efficiency, but also be as transparent with families as possible and as quickly as possible. And if it's able to go into the mobile app, click bus status information, icon, and this pops up on your phone so that you can see it. That was a way to keep parents informed.
I think it's a good compromise, and it looks similar to the ELC, what the ELC does at dismissal time, the
Yep.
departure on time.
Yep. So this would be what ELC's families would look like. Now, Miss Hendrickson and Miss Johnson would still utilize yours because that's more like your teacher one that you put up on the boards, I believe. So they would still be utilizing that. I would basically be almost mirroring that on here for the families to be able to view.
Right, just so I understand this, there would be some type of phone blast sent out to
Yep.
these parents to say, hey, check this website, check
Right.
our website, the links on the homepage or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So when I would do I would have basically a stock message in our communications that would say, you're receiving this message because there's been an update or change to your child's transportation. Please click here. So if it's in your email, you'd be able to click it and it would open this right up. The text message blast would also have a shortened link so they could click on it right within the text message notification and
Cool.
open it up on their phone.
Yeah.
The push notification through the app would be the same. And then the auto dialer call would just, say those words, and then they would have to go and search for it on their own, but it would all be embedded within each of the messages. But it saves us the time of having to grab Avongrove 25 and say, Avongrove 25 is not coming today. Your child is going to be
You don't have to
redirected
customize it, right? Yes, it can be broad.
We would put those details here, but we can quickly do it here as opposed to crafting longer, letter form type of communication.
Makes sense.
So we wanted to try this. I was going to, it's pretty much ready to go. The only other thing I was trying to do was to see whether or not I could make this an RSS feed updates. I don't really know how many parents or people use RSS feeds anymore, or whether that's beneficial, but that was something else we were looking at trying to do. Basically, it would be like if you would subscribe to this Google Sheet, and any time an edit was made, you would receive a notification. But
which could be more confusing than helpful, right? Because may have nothing.
It could be any bus. Yep, it could be any bus. At
some point, you're going to stop checking them because you're getting them daily, and you're like, it's not going to be my bus, right? And the time you don't check it, it's going to be your bus.
Yep. And I think just having the parents trained to check in the morning before you bring your kids out to the bus, check in the afternoon around that 12:30 time, 1 o'clock time when we're typically working on things like this about no buses, would be helpful in terms of communication. So we're going to try to roll this out on the 1st of November and make this a new process. Again, if you leave tonight and you have your parent hat on, and you can think of anything else that would be beneficial in terms of the efficiency and of communication on these issues, I'm all ears, because we're trying to be as concise and timely as possible. The last agenda item is a real quick preview and to get a little bit of feedback on the application and registration process for next year. So we've done things a couple different ways over the last number of years, as we've moved into more of a digital process for our application and registration. Particularly registration a while ago used to be very paper form heavy. And the last couple years we had tried to go paperless as much as we could and created a much longer application that converted some of the questions of paper registration forms that parents previously had to complete into our application. So questions about like McKinney-Vento and homelessness, or we have to ask a question about military family status, or the English language learner development survey questions, the home language survey. That was something parents used to fill out on a form. We digitized those questions and put it in our application. So the goal was to try to collect as much information up front as possible to speed along the registration process, so there wasn't a lot of paper that needed to be done. But I think what we saw and what some feedback from parents was that the application just kind of got too long, and it may have been a deterrent from fully completing the application. Like, you get into something and it's like, how long is this going to take me? So there's positives and negatives to that, right? So there's negatives in that it may have deterred families from fully completing the application because it was long, but the positive is it may have also deterred families who really did not have a vested interest in the school and might have been filling out applications to a number of places, so that they were never really potentially intending to accept a seat anyways. So we tried to flesh that out, and we moved into an added on PowerSchool's registration portal. Previously, we just had a digital application and still had to do all the registration things in-house and by hand. So we added on the registration module, which now allowed us to kind of go a little bit more short form on the application again. So in terms of the application, we asked we basically asked student information, and their demographic information, their birthdays. This is also starting to collect some critical pieces of information that we need for PIMS reporting, as well as items within our admissions policy and process that provide prioritization to certain groups of students. So like we ask, what's your school district of residence? We ask school district of residence because our prioritization provides Avon Grove School District students lottery preference over non-resident students. We collect residential address information during the application to confirm that families applying are a resident of Pennsylvania, which we're required to do. We ask whether or not there are twins, triplets, or multiple births. Families don't have to fill out multiple applications if there's multiple students within a twins, triplets, or multiple birth scenario. They basically say yes, and there's triplets, so it asks, all right, who's student 2 and who is student 3, so that they can fill out all this they can just fill out their information. They don't have to do address and all of that stuff again. It asks legal guardianship information. Who does the parent live with? And then guardian contact information. The application allows two parent or guardian contacts to be entered. During registration, you'll see the ability for them to answer additional ones. Within each of the parent guardian contact questions, it asks if this parent is employed at Avon Grove Charter School or an original founding member. This again has to deal with the lottery priority. That's that indicator that will tell us that student should be coded as a higher priority in terms of lottery. Same thing for Guardian 2. It asks whether or not the current applicant has any siblings who are currently enrolled and attending. So if they say yes, it's going to ask how many siblings do you have that are currently in the school, and then their name and current grade level for us to check and verify. That again is because of sibling status within the lottery preferences. And then we ask during the application if you have previously attended school. So was your child previous school a preschool or pre-K program? No. We're required to collect this first year the student was enrolled in a Pennsylvania school for PIMS, and then it asks previous school information. And that's basically all that a parent has to do to complete an application. Student demographic information, what's your address and where do you live? Do you have any twins? What's your parents' contact information, and where'd you previously go to school? So we shortened it up. After the lottery happens, and if offered a seat, families will be able to accept their seat just like they have in the past. And once they accept their seat, they're going to be sent information on logging into the school's registration portal. The registration portals where new families will fill out all of their admissions information. Existing families will complete their back to school forms, and existing families will complete their intent to return forms. So it's kind of like all three things are done within the same portal. So if they're a new student, and that's really what we're focused on tonight, this new student tab will show. If it's a returning student doing back to school forms, this doesn't show up for them. This information here is pre-coded in based on information that's submitted during the application. This is where we collect other information that we're required to collect for student accounting and federal reporting. So we ask here, this is after the application, after they've been offered a spot, they're now filling out their registration paperwork, and this is where we ask about ethnicity and race. This is where we ask whether or not they've received special ed services before, or have a 504 agreement, and if they can provide us a copy of it at this time. And they can upload the copy right here. This is where we ask that Act 26 affidavit question related to suspension and expulsions. This is a required question. These are required questions that we ask. I also reworded these because this has been an issue that has come up a number of times over the last year, so that parents are a little bit more intentional. Previously, it had the statement and parents had to say, like, I agree or disagree to the statement. And I think if parents are going too fast through it, it can potentially be misread. So now parents have to actively engage with this and say, my child has been, or is currently, or has not been, and is not currently suspended and expelled. So they have to actually engage with that question. So we're hoping that we don't get misinformation there. If they say they have been, it asks the required questions of who, which student, what school were they from, what was the reason for their expulsion. And then they have to acknowledge that if they are falsifying this information, that there are specific penalties, including fines and potential jail time, as well as that if they provide false information, they would be immediately disenrolled from the school. So again, they have to read and actively engage with those two questions. We then ask about their language development. So this gets us primary languages, if they speak any other languages. What language do parents and guardians prefer to receive communication? So this is if we need to set up translation services or anything for families, we collect this information at this point. There's also contacts. The first two contacts within this contact field will be pre-populated with the two that are entered during the application. And then this is where families can enter additional emergency contacts. So at the end, it says, would you like to add another one? If they click yes, the fields drop down again, and they can enter grandmom, the neighbor as an emergency contact, and whoever else they want to add. They then have to order their contacts in emergency contact prioritization. This is where they will fill out all of their medical information. This was previously done in Power School. So this is from the nurses department. They fill out all their consent for medical treatment. They would fill out the medications. This is basically their health forms. Then gets into agreements. This portion will have our technology agreement. They will acknowledge our acceptable use. They'll acknowledge our FERPA agreements, our handbook, our attendance policy. This is where they will go through those documents and basically agree to them all. Families will complete their technology form. Again, this was previously done sort of over the summer in the back to school forms. New students will do this upon registration. And then it goes to the final section where they have to provide their the residency documents and the charter school enrollment form. So previously we had received all of these by paper, or they were emailed to the attendance department, which sometimes things can get lost, or we're dealing with a lot of paper. So this is where parents would upload their 2 proofs of residency, their completed charter school enrollment form, a copy of their child's birth certificate or proof of age, their immunization record. And then if they choose a district from in the residential address that provides transportation to the school, the transportation request, this question will show up to upload their Act 372 request for transportation form. And then they sign. And then they basically have now completed, they've gone from application through the lottery, been offered a seat and accepted, and then went through all of the registration process that they currently do now. It's just all in one place and has the potential to be 100% digital in terms of how we get that information. Within the system, then, our attendance and enrollment coordinators are able to print all of these records to build student files that we're required to have sort of hard copies of at both campuses. So that's a lot, but it's basically what all of our new students go through each year. So is there any questions about any of this, feedback about it? Any teachers or parents on here who have had students go through the registration process, and you're thinking back to your experience and looking at this, have any feedback either way?
I'm just curious how this looks compared to our other local districts. Is it similar? You're muted.
So do you mean in terms of the look and feel of the digital portal, or the length and type of information that's required for registration at the school?
Well, I'm assuming all the registration information is the same, no matter what school district you're in, but I'm just saying how the look and the feel of this versus like the other school districts. Have you looked at any of their applications? And
yeah, well, so I'll answer this a couple ways. So this is Power Schools registration and application module. So it works with our student information systems. Avon Grove School District utilizes this as well for their new student registration. They use Power School. They don't have to go through that application part. Basically, when students come to say Avon Grove, they just go right into this registration side of things, and then are able to go through all of these screens and similar things like this. Now, we have to collect sometimes different information as a charter school than a district does, like an Act 372 transportation form, or this charter school enrollment form. There's some nuances to things that we collect that a district may not have to. From a charter school perspective, this is it's similar to what Collegium does. Collegium still does a lot of has more of like a long form application like we had done previously. From what I can tell from Collegium's enrollment process, it seems like they do what we used to do, where they have a long form application. They collect a lot of information during the application process, and they don't have this second portion, which is the registration side of things. So they have to ask very similar questions as well, though. Like they have to collect the same forms we do. Renaissance has to collect the same forms that we do in terms of those charter specific things. I think what we did here also was in the past, we would have parents that went through the application process, completed the basic registration paperwork, and you did that in March, and then you had to come back in, July or August to do what was back to school forms. We included some of those back to school forms within the registration, within new student registration, so that they're done then. And it's not coming back and asking a lot of that information again later. Like the technology form and things like that, we kind of collected early.
Hey, Brian, this is Kelly.
Yep.
Middle school parent. I just want to say that I think it's great. I love having all the forms in one spot where, you can fill everything out. You can upload it directly from where you pull your documents. You're not, emailing things and heaven forbid faxing things. I don't know if we can add on here or if it's even pertinent, like acknowledging for new parents and families, acknowledging like in the upper grades that you are obligated to do community service hours.
Sure, that's a good idea.
Just as an acknowledgement form. So, that's covered. And then I don't know, this may be a dumb idea, but for the higher grades, if you have high school kids coming in, maybe there's a part of like a short essay or something that they could write as far as like what their interest is or why they're kind of choosing to come to charter, just for those, upper grades, but that's just,
I can take that out. We can't do that as part of the application.
okay.
But on the registration side of things, we can probably, I don't see why we couldn't add it as sort of an optional submission.
Okay.
And to point out, I forgot to mention this. This isn't, I have to sit and do this all in one sitting. You get a login so that you can save and come back to it. So it's not like I need to collect all of this information and sit in one sitting to do it all. The upload portion of it, it's mobile friendly too. So if you have this on your phone and you click upload, you can actually access your camera and then like take pictures of what they are.
Okay.
What documents they are and upload it directly to the form. So that's more of like some families don't have access to scanners and things like that. So it's sort of an access option for them.
Yeah, the app is great. And I think anything like the school bus thing on the app is great. And I think anything, for parents just to have everything in one spot is really great. So looks good.
Any other questions or feedback?
Hey, Brian, what was taken out of the original application?
We haven't really, it kind of just keeps growing. And I think that's why we got that application that was so long, where we really ended up going back and saying, okay, this we don't want to ask in the application. We're going to move that to like the post lottery run.
Okay, so you pretty much didn't delete any information. You just went from, so there's essentially an application process and an acceptance process.
Yeah, so there's the application, then you go through the lottery, and then you will get a notice, just like you typically do, of saying, hey, you're being offered a seat. And once they hit accept, they get the parents will get an auto message that says, basically, thank you for accepting. We welcome you to charter. Now you have to go through like all the registration stuff.
Okay.
And then they would be able to start this process. But like I said, the application you can't save. You have to do the application in one sitting. That's like a dynamic web page, and it's not login specific. So when we got it when it was really long, it took 15, 20 minutes probably to finish. And that's probably too long for one sitting. So it's a little shorter now. I don't think we'll deter anybody from it. And then the longer process of gathering documents, entering your medical information, all of that can be done, save progress and continue to finish.
Gotcha.
We would still continue to adhere to the same timelines that are in our policy though. So the policy gives families 10 days from the lottery notifications to accept and complete the registration process. 10 business days.
Okay.
And that's mainly because you get like, I want to accept, and then a parent might sit for a while and then never do the registration, right? So then after those 10 days, we drop them from the lottery and then go to offer it to a new student. And if that happens a couple times when we're trying to fill a couple seats, you know, it can be hard that there's like that time gap there. Like,
Does that
you know,
parent get an email if they don't complete that application? To say,
yeah,
unfortunately, you did not complete the application in a 10-day time frame. You no longer have a seat.
yeah. As soon as we in the system remove them, basically we move them from a seated offering list to a removed list. They get an auto-generated message.
Gotcha.
All right. Well, that's all I had tonight. I appreciate the feedback on these. I wrote down what everybody was saying regarding the application and the bus form and everything. So we will go back and make a couple, look at the application and the registration process, maybe make a couple tweaks to that, and then get out the bus stuff for parents next week. As well as the families will get an update regarding their FID process soon, because we want to be prepared before we get a snowstorm. That's all I got.
All right. Any other questions, concerns before we wrap this thing up? Once, twice, good to go. Well, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. And as always, thank you for all you guys do for kids. I know it's a really tough job. So thanks for all the hard work and everything you do for our kids. So thanks again. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye, Blaze. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Brian.
Bye,
See ya.
everyone.